Welcome. I've had a fantastic week and I hope you have too. Because it was the last week of term, I invited a guest director in to run the final masterclass session. And Scott Major delivered an intensely focused session on the value of specific and relevant preparation for the actor. It was fascinating, and that's what I want to focus on in this 10th session of our Talking Acting for 2022. The other thing that I found really interesting was that what we played was informed the way that I had been viewing the HBO series Succession. So two things have come together for me. Scott Major made the point to actors that actors generally generalise about their prehistories and they aren't specific and they aren't relevant. You can be totally irrelevant in the preparing of your prehistory, like the type of car your character drives or the name of the dog or where your grandmother was born, but looking at specific lines in a scene and deciding what that's specifically connecting to and how long ago it was specifically makes a huge difference to your understanding of what you're talking about. It doesn't provide a way for you to say a line. It shouldn't be used that way. I therefore say this line because I know this. What it does is inform your understanding of what you know when you're saying a line. And of course, your line still has to be driven by listening to the other character who's speaking to you and by what they mean. But you will now process it within a specific context. And the difference that this made to performances was enormous. So its value is that it specifically builds relationship and circumstance in a functional way. And in doing so, it makes the relationship real because it's built on specifics, and it also informs those myriad moments of surprise in a scene where your character has a decision to make, because that decision is now affected by specifics, and that will expand the identification phase and the assessment phase of those surprises as they happen, making them rich and real. So there were often more spaces in scenes that was significant, that revealed difficulty and that revealed complexity. Now, this technique was being used by actors who are trained in and expert at putting a structured conversation in place. And as such, this technique sitting on top of that brought wondrous levels of believability and complexity. It did, with one of the scenes, completely change the relationship and the purpose in the conversation, and therefore delivered an entirely different story. And that's the trap in just focusing on this ingredient. But what we learnt was how important and how impressive the results were from being specific and relevant to the circumstances that are engaged with a particular line, with the history of a particular line. However, conversation purpose is still important, and it's finding a balance between these things that produces a controllable, manageable, as well as a richly complex outcome. And this, I thought, was interestingly illustrated by the 8 episodes of Succession that I have been watching recently. Because I have been bemused by the fact that scene after scene after scene, I look at what's going on and going, I have no idea what that person was trying to achieve in that conversation. It's fascinating. In that sense, it sort of breaks the rules. But I think that it works because if you look at Logan Roy's children, they are all too fearful about making a bad decision to actually make a decision. So they're frequently not committed to a purpose or a point of view because that's just inviting condemnation. So they play safe and we have these weird conversations. And the power of that story is carried by the quality of the dialogue from the writers, the immaculate and clever construction of the scripts and the story, and the point that the story is making. And so you have an unusual circumstance where storytelling is surviving, even though clear purposes in a conversation are not immediately evident. Maybe that's one of the things that attracts us, is trying to work out what on earth is going on. So, a fascinating week. And those performances in succession, I think, are strongly built on clear understandings of what's happened and specific understandings of what's happened in the past. But for the majority of stories, we need to make sure that we know what the purpose of a conversation is, because that's also going to be a significant or major tool that engages the audience with the outcome as they follow a character's success or failure at achieving their conversation goal. That's a major story driver. And this tool that we're applying this week is a major contributor to the complexity of your listening as you're working your way through that conversation. It was a fascinating and very clear reminder of the importance of that technique. And next week in Talking Acting, I'm going to explore the importance of different spheres of concentration for the actor. I'll see you then. Cheers.
Many actors are confused by the way they've been taught. If you are looking for a simple path to richly complex performances, these techniques can bring clarity and fun to your acting. You can make a start by downloading my free ebook.